Once the recording for Sgt. Pepper was over, the Beatles settled into a routine of low-key, continuous recording instead of squeezing as much into a 3-month album schedule as they had while on tour. This fit their more carefree lifestyle, but it also had an inherent lack of tension that would taint the final product. They didn't have to pay studio fees. All they had to do was find some spare time in the Abbey Road schedules and show up, regardless of what they had to record. As a result, they now spent a large portion of their time at Studio 2, not recording or even rehearsing, but writing songs. Meanwhile, the group's drug use had started to affect their judgment and decrease their level of self-criticism. Between April 3rd and 12th, 1967, Paul decided to pay a visit to his girlfriend at the time, Jane Asher, in Denver, Colorado. It was there that he had the idea for the Magical Mystery Tour. Paul explained, "When we were kids, you get on a bus and you didn't know where you were going, but nearly always it was Blackpool. Everyone would spend time guessing where they were going, and this was part of the thrill. So much of the Beatles stuff was a slight switch on a memory. In Penny Lane, the nurse and the barber and the fireman were just people we saw on a bus route, but this time they'd be with us. So we'd just heighten the reality to make a little bit of surrealism. Privately, I'd got a camera and I would go to the park and make films. We'd show our little home movies to each other and we'd put crazy soundtracks on them. I used to do a little bit of editing at home. I had a little machine and I was getting very into it. So for the next Beatles project, I thought, let's go and make a film. What a great thing to do. It was all done on whims." On the flight back to London, Paul began to plot out the context of the film as well as its theme song alongside Mal Evans. Using the circle to represent the 60 minutes of a TV special, he began planning out the film. As far as the song itself, John contributed only the lyrics, as he put it in a 1980 interview. "One of our great inspirations was always the barker. Roll up, Paul claims. The promise of something, the newspaper ad that says, guaranteed not to crack, the high-class butcher, satisfaction guaranteed from Sgt. Pepper. You'll find that pervades a lot of my songs. If you look at all the Lennon-McCartney things, it's a thing we do a lot. The roll up was also a reference to rolling up a joint. We were always sticking those little things in that we knew our friends would get, veiled references to drugs and to trips." The concept for the TV special, however, was not as well received as the song by John and George. Coming recently from the tragic news of losing their manager Brian Epstein, the boys weren't too keen on embarking on yet another demanding project so soon, and one that they didn't really love doing too. But regardless of the weariness, they soldiered on and let Paul lead them on this trip. But John resented Paul for it, and then minced his words later on.
But Paul made an attempt to carry on as if Brian hadn't died, by saying, now boys, we're going to make a record, and being the kind of person I am, I thought, well, we're going to make a record, all right. So I went along, we went and made a record. I think Paul had a tendency to come along and say, well, he's written his 10 songs, let's record now. And I said, well, give us a few days and I'll knock a few off, or something. I don't imagine the Mystery Tour was another where he'd set it up, and then he'd worked it out with Mal, and then he came and showed me what his idea was, and this is how it went. It went around like this, the story, and he had it all, I think, production. And
at some point, I know John got a bit annoyed, sort of saying, Paul's sort of trying to be the leader of the group and stuff. It's possible that I was there more than anyone.
Jeff Emmerich relates, Paul showed up with a casting book that he had gotten from a film agency, and everyone gathered around, excitedly picking the actors they wanted for the character roles. Everyone had great fun going through the book, shouting out as they flipped through the pages, "Look at him! Look at her!" They were particularly amused by the photos of the fat lady who ended up playing Ringo's Aunt Jessie. "She's 4 times the size of you, Ring," Lennon said with glee. The Beatles worked on the track from April until May 1967. Biographer Hunter Davies writes, "When the Beatles arrived at the EMI studios, all they had was the title and a few bars of music. Paul played the opening bars of Magical Mystery Tour on the piano, showing the others how it would go. He gestured a lot with his hands and shouted, 'Flash, flash,' saying it would be like a commercial. As it turns out, the lyrics were set up as they went along. All Paul had initially was the roll up at the beginning. As they tried many ideas, Mal would write the ones that worked. Reservation, invitation, they've got everything you need, satisfaction guaranteed. Then they laid the basic track, Paul on piano, acoustic guitar by John, electric guitar by George, and the drum by Ringo, take 8 being the best. But a lot of trumpet overdubs would have to be recorded to achieve Paul's vision. David Mason, who had recorded the piccolo trumpet solo for Penny Lane 3 months prior, was among them. Paul, Ringo, John, George, Neil, and Mal all grabbed any old instruments that were lying about, including tambourines, maracas, and bells. Mike Pender of the Moody Blues remembers being in the studio, a few feet away from the microphone, during the recording of the vocal intro, roll up, even though he didn't sing in the song. There was no prearranged score for the brass players, either out of a lack of time or a simple neglect. Malcolm Addy recalls, Paul was humming to the musicians the notes that he wanted, trying for a long time to get his thoughts across to them. In the end, we had to send the trumpet players off for tea, while Paul and George Martin worked things out on the Studio 3 piano. According to Gary Harrod's account, he got so fed up with them not knowing what they wanted that he wrote something out for them himself. It was his idea they used. A variation between the album version and film version, which many Beatles fans may have noticed, is John's recital of the opening instrumental portion.
When a man buys a ticket for a magical mystery tour, he knows what to expect. We guarantee him the trip of a lifetime, and that's just what he gets. The incredible
It's assumed that this was added only to the film's soundtrack and is not regarded as an actual part of the record, as there is no indication that it was recorded at EMI Studios. Although Paul is in charge of this track, the admirable team effort is evident because John's vocals are very prominent in the harmonies. Ringo's drums, with their smashing cymbals and all, play a huge part in keeping the song alive. And the percussionists and trumpet players deserve their share of appreciation. The track demanded attention, much like the Sgt. Pepper theme before it, as if to usher in a new age of Beatle music and to get us comfortable in our seats for a magical trip.